Franklin. It's gonna be fun.
I mean, being from New Mexico, like, I saw them all the time. They're better. But they live in England. Well, they think they're so different. They're actually not as nice. As long as you're not right up front. Yeah, we saw that.
Oh, Sam.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for joining us today for the return of our Texas Focus Film Series here at the Bullock Texas State History Museum. Jessica Hanshaw, I'm the Public Programs Manager here at the museum, and we're just honored that you're with us tonight to relaunch this event, in particular with this 50th anniversary screening of the iconic Texas Chain Saw Massacre. This series is a celebration of Texas films and a cinematic exploration of stories by, for, and about Texans. Tonight, we honor a movie that has become a cultural touchstone for horror fans around the world. As we revisit this landmark film, we're not just reflecting on its lasting influence, but also celebrating Texas filmmaking at its finest. We hope you enjoy this thrilling evening, and we look forward to many more cinematic journeys through this series. At this time, I'd like to welcome Texas Film Commission Director Stephanie Whalen to share a few remarks before the screening.
Hello, welcome. I have to say I was really tickled. We sent that press release out, and I'm always curious who reads our press releases, and you guys sold this screening out in less than 24 hours. So give yourself a round of applause. Like Jessica mentioned, my name is Stephanie Whalen. I'm the director of the Texas Film Commission. The Texas Film Commission is a state agency. It's part of the Office of the Governor's Division of Economic Development and Tourism. What that means is we are a resource agency for all things media production in Texas. We work with local productions to find the resources that they need, as well as try to bring productions into Texas to film. I have a very incredible, hardworking staff, and I'm going to give a few of them a shout out in a minute. But there are plenty of resources that we provide. I know that we had a table earlier, but if you are a filmmaker or a writer or a producer and you need resources, please don't hesitate to contact us. We are not scary. We love to help, and we want to hear what your story is and help you tell that story. So with that brief overview, I also want to give some thanks tonight to the incredible team at the Bullock for partnering with us on the Texas Film and Focus series. I always flip the words around. I also want to say thank you to the Texas Archive of the Moving Image. They are one of our partner organizations, and they did all the cool sort of footage that you saw as you were waiting. So congratulations to them. I want to thank the Governor's Office executive staff. You will hear from them in a second, as well as Adriana Cruz, the Executive Director of Economic Development and Tourism. She oversees our agency and plenty of others, and she's very good about letting us run with our big ideas and only reining us in sometimes. So thank you. Tonight is one of those big ideas, and it came from one of our staffers, Matt Miller, whose hard work and sometimes sheer force of will made tonight happen. So Matt, thank you for all of your hard work. I also want to thank our marketing team, Stephen McKeag and Robert Rodriguez, not that one. They worked really hard to get the word out so that you guys could be here tonight. And the rest of the Film Commission staff, the work that we do every day wouldn't be possible, so thank you. I would like to introduce the Deputy Director, too many titles, the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Office of the Governor, Toby Baker.
Thank you so much. Y'all, she does an incredible job, and as part of my job, the Film Commission sort of is under my side of the agency, the Governor's Office is a state agency. We're sort of in this beautiful time for Texas film. This past legislative session, they gave the film industry over $200 million to put into bringing the industry here. And I think it's the most we've ever had. And from what it looks like, they're heading that way again this coming legislative session to put more money in. And I think the idea is that we can do it better. So it's very Texan, right? I actually she used a phone. I'm old school. I wrote just a few things down. It's a great privilege to work with the Film Commission, which is housed in the Office of the Governor. The Film Commission was actually started in 1971, just a few years older than the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. And like the movie we are celebrating, tonight has become an icon, transcending genres into something larger than a simple movie. We, in the Film Commission, the film industry, and the Office of the Governor aspire to the same for the state of Texas. Texas is bigger than a simple state, and while much of what we know and believe about Texas is true, the movies can help create the legend of Texas, even while the legend of Texas is actually still being created. So I want to first thank all of you who are in the industry and patrons of great film who are here tonight. Thank you very much for what you do. When I was in 6th grade, I spent the night at my friend David Dirkson's house. If you're from New Braunfels, you might know him. With a number of other boys. His parents had gone to bed. We stayed in a sort of back house that had video games, a drum kit, electric guitars that we couldn't play, a television, cable, which was a big deal, and VCR. It was basically Stranger Things. My horror journey began that night with a man wearing a hockey mask. It took the shape of the stoic Michael Myers and then the macabre of Freddy Krueger. And it eventually took me back to where I think it arguably all started, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. The film stuck with me, not because of Leatherface or a meat hook, but because of the oppressive heat. It was the first horror movie set where I grew up. It wasn't a beautiful summer camp, or quaint town in the Northeast during the autumn, or a picturesque neighborhood where dreams went awry. It was set in an uncomfortable setting, hot, gritty, rough, dirty, Texas in the middle of the summer, when the color green disappears from the land, in a time when transplants from California question why they moved here. I grew up ranching just north of Uvalde, Texas, and as I watched, I was immediately uncomfortable because I felt the film. I knew what it felt like. Horror, at its best, introduces us to something primal, tapping into a space within us that we seldom have to use in modern life. A space reserved for fleeing danger, a space our ancestors once faced daily, a space of darkness. In some ways, horror allows us to briefly reach out and touch this darkness, to connect with what we cannot explain. And oh, how well does the Texas Chain Saw Massacre dabble in this darkness. I cannot wait to experience it tonight with all of you. Our hearts all beating a little faster, anticipation in every breath, even though most of us have seen this before. Imagination's running amok. So thank you to the team that's here tonight that gave us the Texas Chain Saw Massacre for 50 years of touching the darkness, and I will say here's to 50 more. Thank you for what you created. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Toby. And with that, enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello, everyone. Yes, round of applause for the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. Yes. So, I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing a few folks. So with me tonight, with us tonight, rather, we have Kim Henkel, who is the producer and co-writer. We have the wonderful actress portraying Pam, Teri McMinn. And we have the composer and boom operator, just a man of all, jack of all trades for sound, Wayne Bell. So please give a large round of applause for these folks. These are the people that are responsible for the amazing film that you just saw. And so we do have a little bit of a Q&A, a conversation that we're about to get started. But before that, I was hoping that I would be joined by our director, Stephanie Whalen, who will be presenting a few things. I'll read it, she'll present it. Just a little bit of official state recognition for these folks who really put Texas on the map in multiple ways, and we are forever indebted to them. So we're going to start with Kim's. Here you go, Stephanie. You want to? I'll read it for you. So Kim, with the Texas Chain Saw Massacre reaching its golden anniversary, it is only right to recognize your vital role in the movie's inception. Growing up in small towns across South Texas, you studied English at the University of Texas at Austin, graduating in 1969. By fate, you befriended Tobe Hooper, and the creative spark between you fostered the creation of one of the most iconic films in the history of American cinema, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. You played an important role in establishing Texas as a home to groundbreaking and fearless artistry. Your work, both on your subsequent film, Last Night at the Alamo, and as a filmmaking teacher at Texas A&M, shows the far-reaching cultural contributions that you have offered the Lone Star State expand beyond any single film. I thank you for being an integral part to the culture of Texas that we all know and love today. Our state is better off because of your talents, and the legacy that you have created will no doubt inspire thousands of young Texans to follow in your footsteps. We hereby present this proclamation to you, Kim, with a copy also living in the Texas State Library and Archives in perpetuity. Thank you. Would you like to say a few words? You don't have to, but you can.
It's operating. Yeah, sounds like it. Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor. When the film was initially released, of course, it was widely vilified. So for us to be here 50 years later and to reap the praise that we have is remarkable, and we're all very honored. Thank you very much.
We have one more that we're going to present to everyone. 50 years ago, the legendary film, The Texas Chain Saw Massacre, hit theaters for the first time. With a budget of less than $60,000, the film was a roaring success, grossing more than $30 million in the domestic box office alone. By synthesizing terrifying violence with subtle socio-political undertones, harrowing performances, and a captivating soundtrack, this film is still regarded as one of the most influential independent films of all time. During a blisteringly hot summer of 1973, the cast and crew endured long hours and grueling conditions to make one of the most iconic films ever to come out of Texas. Their bold creativity, tireless perseverance, and hard work embody the eternal, independent Texas spirit that continues to serve as inspiration for generations of filmmakers to come. As we celebrate the Texas Chain Saw Massacre's golden anniversary, let us recognize the profound influence this native Texas film and its filmmakers have had on the past, present, and future of the global culture of film. We hereby present this proclamation to you, Kim, Teri, and Wayne, on behalf of the entire cast and crew, with a copy also living in the Texas State Library and Archives in perpetuity. Thank you. And y'all are also more than welcome to say a few words if you want. We're about to have a conversation, so it's up to you. Let's do it. Okay. So I invite everyone to take a seat. Everyone has a mic, I think, hopefully. So before we start, obviously thank you to all of you for being here and taking the time. We are truly honored for you to be here, and I mean, this movie means so much to not just me, but to so many people. We sold this theater out, I think, in 24 hours, like our director said. But before we begin, I wanted to ask, who here has not seen this before? Please raise your hand. Wow. That's fantastic. I am jealous of each and every one of you. And my family is over there, and most of my family had never seen it, and I'm ashamed of that. No. I'm a bad son. But it is worth quickly noting that Variety just released their 100 best horror movies of all time, And the #1 greatest of all time wasn't The Exorcist, it wasn't The Shining, it wasn't Night of the Living Dead, it was the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. So, the best of all time. So I can't argue with that. So I do want to start with a question that each of you have probably no doubt have heard, but could any of you have really imagined that you'd be sitting here talking about this little movie, this little independent movie that you made in 1974, 50 years ago? Any of you?
I would say absolutely not. It's amazing that it survived. It was released in 74 and rather quickly went away. And it wasn't until the following year when it was selected to be in Director's Fortnight at Cannes, and we got a good review from a few critics, and gave it a new life. And then it was re-released by a new line in 1981, and somehow we've managed to survive over the ensuing years, and so it's really remarkable that we're here today.
Museum of Modern Art at that same time then put it as a part of its permanent collections. That was part of that wave of recognition that kind of a delayed reaction, but ultimately helped to keep it on the map till we actually don't know what happened, but this year there's been various events, and the love of this film by chainsaw fans worldwide is a pretty phenomenal thing to experience. So we would have never imagined that this would happen.
Well, so when you were making it, what were your sort of realistic expectations? Was this just something that, obviously it was a lot of hard work, a lot of passion went into it, but was this something that you thought, oh, this will just be like a little stepping stone and then we'll go on and make something else? This will kind of be, just a little something that we do on the side, but what were your realistic expectations for this film?
Well, I don't know if our expectations were ever realistic, but we'd worked on a film with Toby called Eggshells previous to this, and
I wasn't necessarily going to bring up Eggshells, but now we can talk about it.
well, no, let's not talk too much about it. Let's
Kim
just
has a
use it
great
as
role in
segue.
Eggshells, everyone. Just FYI, go see that movie.
Yeah. Anyway, I think it played in 1 or 2 film festivals and maybe had a play date in 1 or 2 theaters. And at that time, if you didn't get into a theater, it was dead because there were no ancillary markets. There were no VHS, no DVD, no nothing, no streaming. So we wanted to make a film that we could somehow or another get into theaters, even though we had no name recognition, no money, none of the kinds of things that help you get into the theater at that time. So we had really had 2 choices at that time, we felt anyway, science fiction or horror. And our intent and our greatest hope was to get the thing in a theater or 2. And so.
I'd say you succeeded. Here we are 50 years later. And it kind of makes you wonder what movies made today we'll still be talking about in 2074. I probably have a guess that it's not too many. So Kim, as both the co-writer and the producer of the film, could you talk a little bit about how the movie started to take shape, kind of leading up to the production and everything like that? Well, so you worked pretty, you and Toby worked pretty collaboratively and everything like that. Was there, what was the workflow like between y'all? What were those early conversations like? Did he come to you and say, hey, I have this idea where a bunch of nice kids get, butchered, or, how did that just first start to take shape between y'all?
Sometime after we completed Eggshells, we just started to talk about, the possibility of working together on something and began to develop the basic story, the structure. But we had some disagreements about who exactly the villains would be. And part of the initial thinking is that they were rather incorporeal beings. They never fully became I guess palpable
Yeah.
would be a good word for it. But finally came around to, human beings and the structure we had laid out. We really borrowed a lot of it from Hansel and Gretel and other fairy tales in terms of that structure. And well, once we were agreed on who the villains essentially would be, we really broke the entire first draft, I think, in maybe about 6 weeks. So we got up ahead of steam and didn't let it go. Toby lived not too far from me, actually, right across Mopac from me.
Okay.
And at that time, Mopac was just Mopac. It was railroad
It's
tracks.
a railroad track, yeah. Walk across it.
Yeah, walk across it, Toby's house, and work for, 4 or 5 hours in the evening. This was after I got off work and he got off work. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, we worked, late into the night. And
That's pretty wonderful to hear that, I'm sure we have some filmmakers in the audience and, a film like this, people are doing that exact same thing. They're working a day job and they go to someone's house just with like a little bit of a dream of, oh, maybe I can get into a theater or two, and who knows. Maybe we'll be, in fact, talking about one of your films in 2074. But Teri, so you played Pam in one of these great behind-the-scenes photos. Could you talk a little bit about how you came to be cast as astrology-loving Pam?
Oh, yes. I was waiting tables at Mrs. Robinson's too, and I was attending classes so I could get leads in their plays at Mary Moody Northern Theater, and it worked out really well. And Toby and Kim saw my picture in the Austin American Statesman with Frank Sutton, Gomer Pyle's sergeant. Pyle, get over here. Some of you older might remember that. Anyway, and so when they saw my picture, the director of the theater said, we got a call and these guys are going to do a horror film and they wanted you to read for it, Teri. And it was non-union, which at that time was a big deal to actors, because you wanted to get in the unions. You wanted to get in all 3 unions. That was the big deal. And so I was kind of reticent, and then I went to read for them, and a friend of mine took me out for lunch the next day and said, how did it go? I said, it went well. I said, well, you should do it, Teri. If they want you, you should do it. And I said, well, I don't know. It's horror. It's non-union. I was very skeptical. Anyway, I called Kim, and I said, I really want to do the film, Kim. And Kim said, well, okay, Teri, why don't you come tonight and wear some short shorts? Alarms were going off, but I looked at all my shorts and I picked out my little white ones with the embroider going up the side and a little pink shrink top, and I got on my bicycle, and I lived right by campus, and they were about 10 or 12 blocks away, and so I rode my little bicycle at night over to this, audition. You're really dumb when you're young, You're just really dumb. Anyway, I read, and Kim called me the next day and said, would you like to do the film? So that's how it happened.
There you go.
I personally deny the short line.
There
You are lying.
How many short shorts were there? And so, talking about Pam, rather, all these characters are so memorable and they feel so well-rounded. Who was Pam to you? Was she very similar to your sort of personality when you were, the same age and everything like that? Did you know about astrology, or were you just like, what's this astrology thing? So how much of Pam was kind of inherent to you, and how much, did you kind of have to, act?
Well, she was a lot more into it than I was. personally, but I read my horoscope every day, you know. But I didn't get into Saturn in retrograde. In fact, I learned a lot, you know, a lot of new words. And it was an integral part of me for the character. And I was thinking of doing the vegetarian thing, but it hadn't happened because, you know, I'm raised in Texas. Steak was a reward. You know, meat, bacon, I loved, I still love. Been a vegetarian since 2013. And so, you know, it was a part of me. But to be honest, what happened was they had so much to do technically, so many challenges and things. Bill and I decided to just get to know one another. And we sat back and just did all this, you know, history on our characters. And we actually decided that we were secretly married, but we hadn't told Sally and Jerry, and definitely not Franklin. And I didn't realize until tonight just how annoying Franklin really was. Man, he was, and he wouldn't get together with us for lunch. He stayed in character the whole day, you know. So I did actually kind of resent him. He was sort of like the joy killer of the group, you know.
Full disclosure, we do a Franklin voice in our office pretty regularly. I don't know if Steven's around, but so that character is very annoying, but we love him dearly.
Something should be said at this point. The namesake for that character happens to be attending tonight.
Yes, where?
Jim Franklin, Austin's original armadillo artist, is here at the
Let's give a round of applause for the namesake of Franklin.
Kim, you can pick up the ball here. He was originally going to perhaps do
He
that
was
role.
more than just the namesake for the character. We originally wrote the character for Jim Franklin. He was unable to do it, and
Painting a pool, I believe?
Pardon me?
Painting a pool is what he was saying he was doing?
Leon Russell's pool.
Yes, there you go.
In Tulsa.
Yeah. Well, that's, you're surrounded by filmmaking history, everyone. And so did you and the other cast members, you know, kind of talk about your character with Toby and Kim beforehand? Did they kind of trust y'all to make those decisions? What was that kind of director, producer, actor kind of relationship?
Well, you know, to be honest, I wouldn't consider Toby an actor's director, at least for us. I think he was very preoccupied. He had a lot of weight on his shoulders, trying to keep the money going and arguing with the producers, and that, I think, was just so challenging for him. So, but we were all experienced. I mean, I had been acting since I was 12, you know, doing different things. And so we all were experienced to a degree. You know, we weren't, it's like we'd all formed characters and done that. I was doing a stage play at night with Peter Breck from the Big Valley, and it was the lead role in The Rainmaker, Lizzie Curry. So it was a fantastic role. So I was kind of living my dream. I mean, I'm doing this film in the day, it's hot, I'm tired. Kim's having to come and pick me up and take me to where I'm going at night because I had a motorcycle at the time, a 100. So, you know, it was...
A rebel.
They couldn't let me ride the motorcycle. So Kim, poor thing, had to come in and get me wherever I was. And so I was, you know, very excited in a way because I was getting to act in the day and at night. But what we did when we got to the scenes in the house with Leatherface and Pam, that's when I really felt cohesion with everyone. I had fun with Gunnar. We, you know, we just got into it. And that was a miracle because Gunnar was my boyfriend's roommate and we hated each other because he used to take my boyfriend out to hunt chicks and drink, and you know, I was, well, what about me? I'm chopped liver, you know, he caused a lot of problems. So when we saw each other, Kim called me to come to the RV the first day, and so I went into the RV and I started walking down the aisle of the RV, and in the banquette was this large man with brown curly hair. And as I got even with him, he had said, "Teri, I want you to meet Leatherface." So I got down beside the man with the curly hair, and we both looked at each other at the same moment and went, "What are you doing here?" Exactly at the same moment, and I have no idea. But anyway, when we got to our scenes together in that house, I just, we had a blast doing it. I couldn't walk or talk the next day. For 3 days, I was crying because I couldn't do this in the rainmaker that night and all that, stuff, I was very histrionic. But I realized tonight that it's actually Marilyn who probably couldn't walk or talk either, because that last half of that film, she is a phenomenon, really.
Absolutely. I have this great vision of astrology-loving Pam riding up on a motorcycle on set and just being like, "Where do you need me to stand?" Something like that. Well, Wayne, so it kind of seems like you were a sound department jack of all trades. Obviously this was a low-budget film, so everyone probably did 10 jobs. By being both the boom operator and responsible for all the post-production sound and the score. Could you tell us exactly kind of what all you did to shape Chainsaw's sort of auditory experience, since you were involved in every aspect of it?
That would take too long.
Let's sum it up. What's the Spark Notes version?
There's this production still you'll see on this screen here, and I'm the guy on the far right pointing a very highly directional microphone trying to catch that chainsaw, because the mic was so directional that if you got off it, you could hear it. And so and Daniel Pearl is the cameraman, and then there's of course Marilyn getting out of the truck and Gunner with the chainsaw. The other person, the lanky guy on his knees with the camera, is Ron Perryman, who was a collaborator with Toby on a number of films before this. And the guy holding the battery, that's that pack it's crashed out in the corner of the frame there, it was Larry Carroll, who went on to be the editor of this film. So Larry was a very important part of shaping the post-production, as the editor always is. My job there was the microphone. The other end of the wire was Ted Nicolau, the recordist, and the two of us were the location sound crew. And most of the film is a one mic film, so wherever that mic was, that's what you heard. Except for the scene in the van where we had to wire up the actors and Ted was lying in the back. It was his van, by the way, Ted Nicolau. And his wife, Sally, was the caterer that provided our lunch. So he had to crouch down in various places and try to mix it. But the rest of the time, it's just that one microphone. So the two of us, we had a good time and did as much post sound effects as we could while we were there. But then afterwards, gathering all the rest of or creating all the rest of the sound effects fell to me. And Sally Richardson, then, who's been deceased, I think, for a while, and has several credits as well, and is kind of one of the heroes of making this thing happen, and she didn't get her just reward or just desserts, but she was not only listed in the credits as the assistant director on the set, but then as an assistant editor, actually listed as an editor, and she cut in a lot of the sound that I made, and Larry cut in some, and Toby cut in some, and I cut in some. And then came the score that Toby and I did afterwards. That has proved to be musically influential, which would have certainly surprised both of us if you'd have told us back then. But it was breaking new ground, because most scores at that point were orchestral or combo or some musical instruments, and doing abstract was just rarely done at all, even for horror movies at that point. So that we chose to do something abstract and new intuitively that that was the right thing to do. Was seemed logical at the time, but now now it appears to be groundbreaking. So yeah, I'm all over the soundtrack. It's true.
I want to say that Wayne has just completed putting together a soundtrack album of the score for Chainsaw. It'll be released, I think, before the end of the year.
I'd like for it to be before the end of the month. It's on Waxwork Records, and yes, it's the original score, so it's the original soundtrack album. That's always called the missing soundtrack in the world of scores that people collect soundtrack albums. It's the one that isn't available, and there's always been, whenever there's a list, that's high on the list of scores that have never been heard outside of the movie, and that's about to change. So, go buy it.
Big news, everyone.
It'll be LP, CD, and digital download. And cassette, believe it or not.
Hey, we got those cassette hardcore lovers out there. Well, and that was such a big deal because, right, because the masters were so kind of hard to mix, and they were kind of just, there was no like actual soundtrack, so you had to like put everything together and do all of that work, right?
You mean here in the remake?
For this redo
Yes.
of the
Yes,
soundtrack.
that had to be found, and I kept a little of it,
Yeah.
but the parts that I didn't keep, there's a long story about all of that, and in fact, there's still some missing.
Oh,
But most of it, I was able to get together and enough to fill an album and have all the important cues, so you'll recognize them all when you are, well, there's a couple of little things that Toby and I did that we thought would get in the movie and it didn't, so there's a couple of outtakes that are thrown in, bonus tracks. But it's almost all there, and it sounds pretty good. So though they're fans, they're gonna love this. Seeing without the movie, let me know what you think, but it's been in demand, so now it's gonna happen.
And the opening stinger is piano wire being rubbed together? Is that
I beg your pardon?
Something like that? I don't know.
He'll never tell.
He'll never tell. Okay. I don't think anyone can hear that noise and not just immediately feel chills. So, you've talked about how the soundtrack is very, groundbreaking in many ways, and I think the soundtrack kind of lends itself to the movie in general. Is it's almost experimental in certain ways, and I feel like that may be part of the staying power with this film, is that it was probably such an assault. Like, I mean, I remember when I first saw this movie, and there had been the 80s had come along, the early 90s, and so to see this movie in 1974, I can't even imagine what the average theater goer just walking in, I mean, you know what you're getting into, it's called Texas Chain Saw Massacre, but still, it was a completely different audio-visual experience, and I feel like that has to be a part of why we're sitting here 50 years later talking about this. And
Thanks. That's that's my career has been doing sound for films, and it's the invisible part. So we don't necessarily on the sound side get a lot of credit. It's invisible, So thanks for devoting a few minutes to noting that, yeah, it is an important part of it. And
sound is pivotal.
Also, we had a great time doing it. It was great fun.
Yeah. Well, speaking of kind of indie filmmaking, I've been lucky enough to be part of the Texas filmmaking community before I joined the Texas Film Commission, and it really is like a family because you spend most of your waking hours with these people, working 12, sometimes 16-hour days. So I know what it was like when I got started in like the 2010s, but like what was Austin, the filmmaking scene in Austin, or just Texas in general, like in the 70s, and I don't think I will ever be that cool. I just want to point that out. Like, that's just so cool.
Especially the watermelon.
The watermelon, and I think Dr. Pepper, which I do.
Ubiquitous on the set,
Dr.
everywhere
Pepper.
with Kim and Toby had.
I don't think I've ever seen a behind-the-scenes photo or a photo of Toby without a Dr. Pepper somewhere in the frame. So But what was filmmaking like back then in the 70s in Austin? Was it very tight knit? Was it everyone just kind of coming together? And obviously our office was very new, but I'm just trying to get a sense of what
Your
it was
office
like.
didn't exist yet at that point.
Well, it was in 71. We were founded in
Warren was made the film commissioner in 71.
71. Yeah.
Amazing.
I believe he was
Excuse me.
25 or 26 or
Yeah,
something like
so
that.
Warren Scarron, the first film commissioner, is the fellow who really came up with the title. The first script that Kim and Toby did was called Head Cheese. And the next
pretty good.
draft, the draft that we shot with had the name Leatherface. Shall I hand it off to you at this point? I should.
Yeah, we always thought of those as working titles. We knew that ultimately we weren't going to call it either Head Cheese or Leatherface, but we were struggling with what to call it, and we were tossing around a lot of things. And it was back in the day before smartphones, and still, we were punch button and rotary dial, so, there were a lot of telephone booths around. I don't know why I recall this, but having a conversation with Warren Scarron while I was standing in a telephone booth, and he gave me that final version of the title that we ultimately used, and it was kind of the thing, when you hear it, you know it, and that was it.
History was made.
Yeah.
Wayne, I read an interview that you did, and I really liked what you said, that you were kind of learning as you went along on this film, and that you go back and you can actually hear your booming get better as the shoot progressed, which I think it's such a cool concept. On paper, this film shouldn't have worked. Like, very little time, not enough money, a young, relatively inexperienced crew, but obviously every single aspect of this movie just hits. And so I wanted to ask each of you, what was the thing that you learned when you were filming this that you didn't know at the beginning? What was the biggest thing that you realized at the end? Like, oh, I know how to do this now, or this is what I kind of took away, like the biggest thing.
I think what I took away from it was exhaustion. It was, my day would start about 4 a.m. Ed Neal, who played the hitchhiker, was a tomcat, and given, communication abilities at that time, Ron Bozeman and I, often were tag teaming, trying to track him down, and the best time to do it was about just before dawn, when he would somehow come trailing in. And then we had issues with our family's pet chicken. In the heat, they would die occasionally. Mm-hmm. And it was my job, amongst many others, to be the chicken wrangler. And there was a little slaughterhouse down at the end of the Red River Street. And chickens would escape into this little pen in the back, about the size of this stage. And for a quarter, I could go back there, but I had to do a Rocky Balboa and chase the thing down. So, it was just very long days. Yeah. And I think it took a while, well beyond the end of the film, for me to realize, what I had gained from it.
So the glamorous life of filmmaking is basically what you learned, yeah. Teri, Wayne, anything you picked up that you didn't know when you first started?
Well, I learned everything. It was my first experience with film, so I was, green. But I learned that you have to wait hours sometimes for clouds to pass so that you can do the next shot. And I couldn't imagine why we had to wait hours for these clouds. Texas in the summer can have crazy clouds. I learned that fighting a man for your life is harrowing. And, Gunner weighed 300 plus, and fighting him all day. We started that day of Pam and Gunner in the house. And we started it in the morning, and we finished just as we were losing light, which would have been around 8:30. And that was when Kim handed me a bottle of Johnny Walker Black or whatever, or Scotch or Burt, whatever. And I just drank it so that my throat could be, coated, because I had lost my voice. But we still had Toby had 1 million angles for us that day. It was truly harrowing. But I'm just trying to remember, do you remember taking me home that night? Because I've been
Didn't ride the
trying to
motorcycle that day?
remember. The only thing I can remember is lying in my bed after that day and just weeping because I couldn't even turn over. That's how sore I was. And it just got worse the next day when all the things went into my bloodstream. So that's what I learned.
Again, so glamorous.
Oh, so glamorous. We
Family.
sat on the ground.
Oh, didn't have the folding chairs. So for those of you who don't know and haven't guessed it, shooting this was no cakewalk. Most of us have heard the stories about the blistering heat and some people walking off set to maybe vomit to feel a little bit better, or a few people even walking off set to maybe never even come back. So were there any particularly difficult moments? I think we already maybe got yours, that you recall being on set and you were just like, what the hell are we doing? Why are we making this film? Like just a really, dark soul of the night moment where you're just like, why are we making this?
There was a kind of an infamous 28-hour shoot where we were going for that length of time, and certain circumstances led us to having to do that. But I have to say, all of us were really novices. This was, for most of us, our first experience, at least in feature-length film. And no one ever even thought about protesting or walking away or anything. Everybody was there and never thought about doing anything except going forward. Maybe there were things going on that I didn't hear about, but
No,
as
we
far
were
as
committed. Everybody was really committed, and we wanted to do the best job that we could. What would happen with it, it just got more and more unclear. I finished filming and I got a job with Andy Devine, guy. Big old Andy Devine, Roy Rogers' sidekick. Some of you older will remember. Anyway, and he and I were talking. He said, "Oh, Terry, that GD thing will never come out of the can." And I mean, he was just insistent with me. So, and he'd done about 80 films, no small, with John Ford and Stagecoach. It wasn't like he was a novice. And, when he said that to me, I was like, oh. I had no idea either. I just knew that I had to make money and get some more work.
I was having the time of my life. I thought it was great. It was hot as hell, but it was, I grew up in Texas. It was great fun. And I came away knowing that I'm in the right place. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So that...
Well, you kept doing exactly that.
Yeah.
You're still working with Rick Linklater and,
Yeah.
just doing what you're doing, yeah.
And I and my partner, Tom Hammond, have mixed two of the three films that are made for this theater. It's a 4D theater, so it's unlike any other, so you have to bring the gear here and mix it here, because it has speakers everywhere, including underneath your seat, your ass. There's a voice coil underneath each seat, and when we mix the sound, we can send low frequency to that and literally shake your ass. So the LaBelle that's still playing here and Texas Weather that used to play here filmed two of the three productions custom designed for this theater. I mixed, did sound effects and created it. So it's, that Eggshells really, and then Chainsaw started me off doing what I'm still doing today. So that's why it's great for me. One reason. It was great fun also. It was hot.
I mean, I'd give anything to be on that set. I'm not gonna lie. I would be happy just being there and 110 degree and, so.
One other thing, the friendships made.
Mhm.
Gunnar and I became great friends after this, and great friends till he passed away. And in fact, my honeymoon was up to Boston and then up to Maine and hung out with Gunnar. So it was who you're working with ends up being an important part of what your career is. And certainly the joy of it is working with who you work with, and if it's friends, it's great.
I've worked on shows that were awful. I knew I would never watch what I was actually making, but the people that I surrounded myself with it made every day just, the best day in the world. So, and alternatively, we always focus on the negative. It was the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, but was there a positive moment that each of you, or any of you who had one, where you were on set and you thought, hey, this is actually gonna work, or it was just like a moment where you're like, I think we're actually making something, maybe not that we'll be talking about in 50 years, but this is gonna work in some sort of way?
Yes.
Yes? Would you like to share it?
The day that we did the meat hook scene, that we started early in the morning, first thing. And the day before, Toby had pulled me aside and he said, Teri, have you thought about the meat hook scene? And I said, actually, Toby, I have. And what I told him was that I thought that if he put her on the hook and she wasn't hit in a strategic point, her spine, whatever, that she might try to get off the hook. And Toby said, yeah, let's go with that, and see what happens, basically. So we did that, and around noon, we finished my last shot, hanging and agonizing and all that, and Toby called cut, and I looked down from the meat hook, and everybody, the complete cast, crew, everybody was there, and it was silence. I mean, it was like a pin could drop, and I saw their faces, and I thought, gee, I think we might have something here. And I did. I really had a feeling that it had, I don't know, it came together for me. And when it had been a bit scattered and loose, what's going to happen? And we couldn't see any dailies. At that time, you're not dealing with dailies. They just don't exist. I think one day Toby showed me just a moment, but we were out in the sunlight, and I couldn't even really see, what was on the screen.
Didn't have a video village set up.
No, and so, right.
I had great faith in Toby. I had worked on eggshells and had known Toby had been a friend for a while, and his creativity and savvy with film language. I had great confidence that it would be interesting. I, of course, didn't envision what did happen, but I had great faith that the end product would be a good thing, would be a piece of work that I can be proud of. And Toby gets a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I would like to say that somehow or another, we managed to put together a remarkable cast and crew, some of whom you don't hear much of, like Ron Bozeman, who was our production manager. He went on to work with Jonathan Demme over the years and won an Academy Award for Silence of the Lambs. Daniel Pearl, our cinematographer, and this was his first feature film, has had a long career in the business. Wayne has continued to work in the business with Tom Hammond, with Rick Linklater, with other filmmakers. Larry Carroll, who was one of the editors, really became a writer and had a long career in Hollywood. And on and on. It was just extraordinary. What the individual cast members, I think, brought to it was extraordinary. I think in many ways, particularly for the good guys in it, it was pretty thinly written, and they really fleshed it out in ways extraordinary.
Yeah.
Ed Neal was just remarkable, and he still is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was just an
It's the exact same today.
Yes. But, you know,
Still
what an
hitchhiking.
extraordinary group of people. How did we all come together in that one magical summer? I don't know, but there it is.
Yeah. Well, you know, we as we've kind of mentioned, we have, you know, sadly lost several key cast and crew members. A few of them, you know, a little young. You know, obviously Toby Hooper, the writer, co-writer and director, Marilyn Burns, Sally, Gunnar Hansen played Bubba, Jim Sedow, the cook, Paul Partain, who played Franklin. So if we could just give a quick round of applause for everyone who could not be here, but is still a very important voice in this film. And I know, are we doing okay on time? Sorry, I don't know. Okay, I need to probably go a little faster.
Are y'all bored yet?
Everyone's good? Okay. Kim, I know we are all here as, you know, Chainsaw fans, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention another one of your films you wrote last night at the Alamo. We were talking about this movie in the office a little while back, and we mentioned how just kind of authentically Texan it feels. Our state can, you know, can be pretty easy to lampoon because there's such a worldwide cultural awareness. But this movie really feels like it's made by Texans, not just about Texans, like certain projects, you know, sort of today. What is it you think about Texas that sort of gives us so many great stories to tell, and there's this mystique around it? Do you have any idea what that is and how you can capture it?
I don't know if I can answer that question. We just seem to breed crazy here.
You're not wrong. Here we are sitting talking about the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, so.
You know, the willingness to try stuff, and musically, Texas is famous for being a place where music hybridizes. People mix musical styles to come up with something new. Texas swing was a mixture of country fiddle music and jazz, and that's Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys created this whole thing called Western swing, and it could have only been in Texas. And I was involved in the whole, what was called progressive country. The thing that first put Austin on the map nationally in terms of culture was the wave of sort of country rock that happened in the 70s, and I was very much involved in that. And that was, again, hybridizing, the willingness to try something new, mix things up. And that seems to be a kind of a special Texas trait that isn't as prevalent perhaps in other places. I get asked this a lot about Texas, and I've had to, I've realized that, but it's at first it's kind of dumbfounding that it's, what do you, because it's too big. Well, what is it about this? But there is something about it, this place. And that's one at least.
Yeah. Well, I'm getting the signal that we should probably keep going here. So the series has spawned sequels, remakes, documentaries, even a really fun Texas Chain Saw Massacre game that I have played for multiple hours. And so, you know, it's had a huge cultural impact overall. So Kim, looking forward, are there any, we know about the soundtrack now, which I'm sure everyone is super excited about. Are there any future Chainsaw plans or anything that you can share at this point? Or?
Well, sorry, yes there are. I'm not sure which of them will come to fruition, but you know, there's a film in the works at, you know, a very early stage. There's also the possibility of a television series and a documentary about the making of, and various and sundry other projects involving merchandising and game possibilities. So.
Okay. So plenty of more Chainsaw
yeah.
in our future.
Yeah.
So, do we have time for audience Q&A?
We have time for a couple of questions. So myself on this side and Kimberly on that side have a mic. If you have a burning question you would like to ask, raise your hand, we'll bring you the mic.
All right, I got one.
Excuse me. First of all, I just want to say thank you all for your work on this film. I'd never seen it before, and it's really inspiring hearing all of your stories from the production of the film. It just blows me away, all the things that you guys got to do on this set. Kim, I have a question for you, sir. I really love screenwriting, and I'm so fascinated by how dark and macabre this film is, especially for the time. You know, my grandmother told me her first date with my grandfather was going to see Friedkin's Exorcist, and that it was so horrifying. And watching this, I can only imagine what that was like. And as a writer, I wanted to ask, what was that like, trying to bring those kind of images and those scenes together, and what was your process in coming up with something so twisted and crazy, especially for the time, something that a lot of people hadn't really been used to in cinema? But yes.
Well, I'm going to blame it all on my family, many of whom are here tonight. They're a pretty wild and crazy bunch, so they're inspiration for a lot of the madness you see here. But it really plays with classic themes. It's Robert Louis Stevenson, Jekyll and Hyde, the contradictions in human nature. And these guys were at once monsters, and at the other time espousing very conventional and bourgeois kinds of feelings. The Jim Seedow character, the cook, is very upset, when he comes home and discovers the destruction of the door, and just upset that they have no pride in their home. And those kind of conventional attitudes, living alongside people who are doing what they're doing was, great fun for me to portray. So I really enjoyed that, and that was, for me, the most fun to do, is those aspects of it. And once we started, those kind of things kind of snowball. They're just too much fun to stop.
We have time for one more. If you raise your hand, Kimberly will bring you the mic. All right, we got right down here.
I apologize in advance for talking so long.
Can you raise your hand?
Hi. My question is primarily for Kim, but I realize the nature of the film industry at the time. You may have all crossed paths with Eagle Pinnell. I wonder if there's any kind of reflection or memories on Eagle that you'd like to share?
I'm sorry, I could not hear. He's asking about Eagle.
Yeah, is there any memories or reflections on Eagle from that time when you worked with him that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I met Eagle, I think it was during post-production. He was here in Austin, and he was struggling to make films. I think the first thing I remember seeing from him was a documentary piece about, I think his name was Larry Mann. He was a bull rider. And then Toby and I took off to LA, and Eagle made a couple of shorts, and then the whole shooting match, and Wayne worked on that. And it's an extraordinary film. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's a little black and white film. And, it's flawed in many ways, but in other ways, it's one of the most remarkable and genuine films I've ever seen. I think it remains that today. He was extraordinary in his way, but also, unfortunately, very self-destructive, and died young, and really made a couple of really good films, and wish he were here with us today and making more films.
Both Kim and I got to collaborate with Eagle on those two films, on Alamo, and the music for Alamo, but mostly on the whole shooting match. And Kim really saved Alamo. I don't think it would have been finished if Kim hadn't been there, in addition to co-writing it. But the Eagles Films did a thing for Austin film community and for the American independent cinema. And And again, it came out of Austin. It's amazing how much influence our little community has had in American cinema, at least. But Eagle was one of those characters that was drawn to here and had that sureness of what he was doing, just like Linklater does today, or even Toby then had a sureness about what he wanted and what he didn't want. And that kind of vision is a necessary thing. And so Eagle is important for that.
All right, as we wrap up our special 50th anniversary screening of the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, I want to once again thank Kim, Teri, and Wayne for joining us this evening and sharing their memories of creating this truly iconic Texas film. I also want to thank Matt and the Texas Film Commission for their support of the Bullocks Texas Focus Film Series. We're excited for this series to have returned. Be on the lookout for our next film in the series announcement coming soon. And thank you all of you for joining us tonight in celebration of this Texas film. It's truly iconic. It's impacted so many lives. I think we can see here this evening for that. So thank you, and we hope to see you again. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Come on, Franklin. It's gonna be a fun trip. If I have any more fun today, I don't think I'm gonna be able to take it.